Well, hello. How are you doing? I need to change my glasses or I won't be able to see the screen. Okay. Well, today is more of a test of my voice than anything else. I've been fighting I'm going to say it's a cold. And let's just go with that. But yeah, there's something going around. I don't know if you've heard. I don't know if I have it or not, but I just know that my voice has been affected. So I'm staying away from people wearing a mask when I am around people and taking my vitamins and getting rest. Well, anyway, so I feel fine though. So, but you can't pray for my voice. I need it for Sunday. So this is a test of whether or not it'll hold up for a little while. Today, I would like to discuss. We were on the subject last show of the King James Bible, and we looked at some so-called errors in the King James Bible. We saw how. Whoops, that's not what I want. Hold on, let me get organized here. We saw how these so-called errors were very weak. They weren't really errors. They were more of translation decisions, and they weren't actually things that were wrong. They were all things that some people could argue could be translated a different way, but you can't say that the way they were translated was in error or was incorrect. And I think that's the big thing. However, when you come to the newer versions of the Bible, you can say this is incorrect. As a good example, you look at 1 John 5:7. You can argue the regardless of arguing the texts of the manuscripts, if you leave out 1 John 5:7, if you leave out the passage that the newer Bibles leave out, not only are you missing a great verse on the Trinity of the doctrine of the Trinity. Not only are you going against tradition, not only are you going against the church fathers who quoted that verse as early as the mid 200s, you are also creating an error in the text. A solecism, I think is what it's called, but I'm not a Greek person. But I do know enough to know that it creates an error in the text. When you omit that text, the subject and the predicate don't match. Okay? And so to print that way is an error. If you were going to print it correctly, and you were going to be honest, and you completely believed that the text that is there in the tradition, that is there quoted by the church fathers, that is there that the church has had that we can trace all the way back from the beginning. If you believe that is incorrect, that it doesn't belong there, then the least you could possibly do is leave a blank and make some kind of note that there is a passage of God's preserved word that is missing. And we don't know what goes there. But to leave it out and just print it the way it is in almost all modern translations of the Bible, to just leave it out and print the English sentence is to create an error. Now, that's more than I wanted to say about that. I tend to do that. But so we did that last week, or last show, whenever that was. I want to then talk about this theme that we're on, sort of the King James, and not, I guess, error, but there is a issue. Let me put it this way. There is an issue in the King James that I think is worth discussing, that is worth us talking about on a deeper level. And that's the etymology of the word church that we take for granted in English all the time. We use that word just constantly. And sometimes we use it in error. But nevertheless, it is an accepted English word. It's in the English dictionary and has been for hundreds of years. Yet we can go and look at this word and see that it was an invented word. It was a made-up word for the most part. But let's look at that. So let's just look at it. So the first time it appears in the New Testament is in Matthew 16:18, referring to the Christian church. First time it appears referring to the Christian church in the New Testament. Matthew 16:18 is right here. Now it is also, this passage is, I thought it was repeated. Oh, it doesn't matter. So the word that is in Greek here, now let's just read the passage. Also, I say to you, Peter, Petros, and on this rock, Petra, I will build my church. Now, the rock he's speaking of is the foundation that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. We see that up here when he asked Jesus, who do you say I am? And he's saying that's the rock of the foundation of the church. Okay, so not Peter. He's making a little word play there. But he's saying that what Peter has said, so that you can almost say like you're a chip off the old block. And the old block is that I am Christ. What you said, not you, but what you said is a chip off the old block. That's not what he's saying, but he's making a play with words there. But that's not the point. The point is, he says, I will build my church. Now, there was a lot of debate, and the word church that Jesus uses here is the Greek word ecclesia. I don't know if that's the way you pronounce it or not, but there's the Greek word, ecclesia. And we can pull that up, and we can see what that word meant in Greek. And it meant, you can read the definition for yourself there, popular meeting. But notice here that it is the same word that they would use for Jewish synagogue. So this was a known word to them for a meeting of religious people. Now, this wasn't at the temple. Temple worship was something completely different than a synagogue. A synagogue was a place in each town where Jews lived that they would mutually support the, just like we do with our churches, they would mutually support the upkeep of this building, and they would meet there to support one another, to read the Torah, to discuss Jewish matters. It was just a meeting place for them to encourage one another, to fellowship, all those things. And it was the Jewish synagogue. And the synagogue is the Hebrew word. The Greek word was ecclesia. Okay. So this sort of already had this kind of meaning. Jesus wasn't assigning a new meaning to this. He's saying my synagogue, okay, my church will be founded on this principle that I am the Son of God. Okay, so that's what he's saying there, but that's not what I want to discuss. I'm not doing a devotion on that. And what I'm talking about is the decision by the King James translators to use the word church, because that was not an English word. That word did not exist. What had happened was there was a movement called the Reformation, and it was happening. And if you look at, I think it's Wycliffe's Bible, if I'm not mistaken, he uses the word here, congregation. And there was another attempt at a Bible. I think it was the Geneva Bible, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe it was a Tinsdale Bible. I'm forgetting. But they also used the word congregation, or another word that meant the gathering, something like that. But the point is that King James had very little influence. He didn't really give them any, he didn't mess with the translators at all. However, he did here. He did, through his influence, it's said, did not want this word translated congregation, because he wanted to maintain the head of England, the King of England, as the head of the Christian church, head of the Christian organization. Okay. And so he didn't want them translating this word ecclesia as congregation or community or, any of the assembly. I think that was the other word that somebody used, assembly. And so they were kind of in a pickle. because they did not want to convey that each individual assembly that there was because that was associated with this autonomous kind of attitude. And it's not inherent in this passage at all, but it was just kind of the culture of the day. And so, because there were so many people rebelling against the Roman Catholic Church. And so, this was the discussion. And they didn't want to use the Latin word there because that would have then pointed them towards Roman Catholicism, which is like, what word do we want to translate ecclesia into that the king would be happy with, and then whatever. Well, they settled on a word. They settled on the word church from a sort of group of words. There was a Dutch word that was called Kirk, and there was a German word called Kirche, Kirche. Okay, and there was a Greek word called Kurikon, Kurikon. And all of these words, or the German word, sort of came from the Greek word. And this Greek word, Kurikon, which also had the same sort of meaning in German, when they would say the word Kirche, Kirche, it meant house. But it didn't mean the structure of a house. It meant the household, the people of the house. So like if you would say the house of McFadden, or the house of Gucci, that's popular right now. Then that word that you would use there for house was this Kirche, okay, Kirche. So they took and transliterated that word into English. They just made a new English word that meant Jesus' house, God's house. Okay, that was their point in making that word. They used it, and they made it English by, I don't know the exact reason they changed the spelling or to make it English, but church, Church. And that may have been just a transliteration of how it was pronounced. But I don't know that for a fact. So that's where we get this word church. Now, why is that interesting in the King James? Well, because it comes from the King James. Our English word church comes from the King James translation. And here's what else is interesting. If you go to any other Bible, and look up that passage, any modern Bible, what word is going to be there? You can even go to the Jehovah's Witness Bible. You can go to the Mormon Bible. You can go to the New American Standard. You can go to the ESV. You can go to the RSV. You can go to any modern English. I have found none. I've looked at a bunch. I've looked at quite a few of just for this passage, just for this show, just to make sure that I can make this statement. I've looked at tens of them. Okay, over 20 checked translations of modern Bibles, all the popular ones, the Living, the New Living, RSV, ASV. Okay, so I've looked at all those, all the ones that pop up, in the Bible app. When you go to BibleHub.com and you type in a passage, you get like all the popular different translations there below of that same passage. So you can see them laid side by side. And if you go there, they all say church. Even the Net Bible, which is the most critical new Bible, the most critical, it relies the most heavily on the critical theory, still uses the word church in Matthew 16:18. So, they're relying on, and this is the reason why I bring this up, and the reason why this discussion I think is important, is that all of these translators from all these Bibles are relying on the traditional text. They're relying on the majority text. They're relying, but not the majority text is in Greek. So I don't want to say that. I want to say they're relying on the traditional text. They're relying on the King James translators in this moment to translate that word, whether they know it or not. Maybe they're just looking up the English word in the dictionary and go, okay, what does this match? Okay, ecclesia means, okay. But the point is that they wouldn't have that word. We wouldn't be translating that word that way if not for the King James translators. Now, right or wrong, you can make an argument that they should have stuck to their guns and used the word assembly or used the word congregation or whatever. Okay, sure, you can make that argument, but that's not the point. The point is that if we're going to have an intelligent Bible, if we're going to rely on the Bible that was delivered to us, the Bible that the church has received throughout history, then we need to be consistent. And translating this word church just shows that there's inconsistency in the theory, there's inconsistency in the philosophy, there's inconsistency in the translation process with the new critical text. And I've made that argument over and over again. You can't hold to the inerrancy of Scripture and rely on the critical theory of textual transmission. It simply goes in the face of that. It simply goes right in the face of biblical inerrancy. And not only that, it denies that God has preserved his word. Because of things like this. All right. Well, it seems like my voice did hold out for what I wanted to say today, and I'm glad we got to look at this passage. Hope that you are well, and there we go. And I hope that you have a good week. I hope this is encouraging to you. I want you to be able to lean on your Bible, and the more that you know, and I feel like the more that I'm informed about the traditional, about orthodoxy, not the religion of Eastern Orthodoxy, but orthodoxy in the sense that the church has always believed a core doctrine, apostles' doctrine, that we've always had the same Bible. The more I investigate it, the more I research it, the more confidence I have in it. By the way, there's a website that I've been wanting to tell you about, but it was down. It was down for several weeks over the Christmas holidays, and it's back. And so it's one guy running it, and that's just what you get. I wish he had a team, but obviously he doesn't. And it's just a treasure trove of information, and it's Textus-Receptus.com. Spell that out. Textus-Receptus.com. It's a wonderful website full of just notes, and they're not all the links in their work, which is kind of frustrating when you dig down and you want to read, oh, there's a book. He's referencing this book, and he's got a link to this PDF of this scanned-in book, and you really look at it, and it's gone. It's broken. But again, he's one guy, and it's a massive website. There's just thousands of links there. That's why I said I wish he had a team that was keeping track of all that and looking for broken links and fixing them. But I know he's just a one-man operation. It's Nick Sayers, I believe is his name. But nevertheless, it is a wonderful website. It's in wiki form, and it goes through and lets you kind of research any passage of Scripture you want into the Greek and into the Textus Receptus and see where that passage, what the Greeks, what the issues are, what if there's any issues, what the different manuscripts say, and you just get this overwhelming sense as you look through there that, man, there's no issues, there's no problem. I mean, every problem, this variance and this variance is just the same word spelled two different ways. When we look at the Textus Receptus, is so, I just have such a high confidence in what it is and where it comes from and how much it has been used by the church. So check that website out. I found it very helpful. I've wasted many hours on it. All right. Talk to y'all later. And, be encouraged. Have faith in God's preserved word.